Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, there was some news about neurodiversity. A lot of news, actually, about neurodiversity. And, well, the topic of my article this week, and kind of the topic of a lot of things this week, is I almost went back into hiding and wanting to pull up the I'm not neurodiverse mask that I used to have and tried to hide who I was, tried to hide my misspelling. Like, I almost pulled that back up, and it's been over 20 years, I realized, actually almost 25, that I haven't felt that way. I just have not been living in that life of complete masking and nobody knows about this and I have to try and cover it up. It literally was in 2021 when that shifted for me. I was graduating from college and I was so damn proud of the fact that I'd gotten through school, because I truly went into that experience, my post-secondary education, believing that I was very, very stupid, very dumb, that I had no ability to even participate in school and probably shouldn't be there, but I was going to try, because I really did not want to work a warehousing job the rest of my life. And so I was going to try, and I remember when I first went back, I was comfortable. I was like, I'm going to at least get C's and D's. Like, I can just do what I did through high school, and then I'll at least have something in the end. It turned out in the end, and this is why I actually asked to do a commencement speech, begged to do one, honestly, was because in the end, I graduated with honors and a 4.0 GPA and surprised myself in a lot of ways. And it was incredible. And it was a wonderful moment. And so I give the commencement speech, and as it so happens, obviously the press was there. And the local press at the time in 2001 was the major outlet. They did an article about the graduation, and I made the article and a few quotes. And of course, I was quoted as talking about my dyslexia, which I mentioned in my speech. And so in that moment, I'm no longer hiding from that. The mask is kind of off. I don't exactly run around and talk about it after that, but slowly as the years go by, I do recognize how it's playing into my life. And as I continue to learn more and more about it, I become more and more genuine about letting people into that fact and just saying, you know what, it does suck. My spelling's really bad in that email. I'll continue to work on that, which means I'll proof this 10 times before it goes out. But that was my reality. And it was wonderful to take that mask off and to not be feeling that anymore. And really, by the time I decide my coaching really needs to go into this area, at that point, I'm all in. Like, at that point when you're like, I coach neurodiverse people with dyslexia, ADHD, and autism, that kind of sums it up. Like, you're not hiding at that point. And anytime people ask me, like, well, why do you coach those people? And I'm like, oh, because I am a different thinker. And I feel best equipped to provide the support services and coaching that they're looking for, because I knew what I needed and was struggling to find over all these years. So why I'm sharing all of that is the fact that I hadn't thought about masking. I hadn't thought about this feeling that happens. Anybody that's neurodiverse knows this feeling. Anybody that is not standard issue, normal, air quotes, knows this feeling where you're around people or there's a conversation being had and you're not exactly sure on your safety. Like, could somebody do some physical harm to me? Could somebody want to be very aggressive with their wording and their engagement with me if they were to find out that I'm different? And that only has happened to me maybe 3 or 4 times since that graduation commencement speech. And it was interesting because that pit in my stomach, that feeling came again a couple weeks ago when, I'm going to look at my notes here real quickly, the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, had a press conference where he was going over the Autism and Development Disabilities Monitoring Report, the ADDM. If you didn't know that existed, neither did I, but it does. It's a network report that is a surveillance system used by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, to monitor the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and other developmental disabilities in children. It provides data on the current status of ASD prevalence and trends over time, among other. He also stated other things. But this was the part actually that stuck out the most for me. And it came near the end of his speech. I've watched the whole thing, and he said, I would urge everyone to consider the likelihood that autism, whether you call it an epidemic or a tsunami or a surge of autism, is a real thing that we don't understand, and it must be triggered or caused by environmental or risk factors. He goes on to say more. I really don't even like that I'm quoting any of that. I've got the full quote in my article if you want to see. And I also have a link to the full conference if you want to see it, press conference, and a transcript. So just total transparency. It's all there. He's had a lot of other quotes during that actually garnished a lot more clickbait, were used to describe it. Those weren't actually the ones that jumped out at me. A little bit, but not a ton. It was the word epidemic and tsunami, actually. That for me, I went, wow, that was actually challenging. And to describe a disease, I don't typically walk around and say, well, I have the disease of dyslexia and ADHD and autism. I just don't typically describe myself as having a terminal illness. That was another term that he used a couple of times. It's interesting. I'm not saying those aren't appropriate terms. I just don't identify with them. So this is a conversation about labels and projections and other people's language. And when the language is different, your interpretation of that language. And so that's what my article is about. How I spent a week kind of processing that and thinking about that. And I truly, like a lot of people, had an emotional reaction to that. Felt frustration, anger, fear, anxiety, sadness, curiosity a little bit for, where this might go. And then I kind of spent a week just wrapping my head around that and feeling out the label that felt like it had been applied through that conference and through a lot of conversations that were coming at me, brought on by that press conference. And one of the ways I dealt with that, I actually did a bunch of research because I was very curious why he is so focused on autism and perceives it in the manner that he does, which I find kind of interesting. That too was well worth the deep dive and the 4 hours that I spent doing it. And I cannot tell you I found any answer, because who knows? All I can say is I put together kind of a history of things, and it makes a lot of sense, actually, to me. And the people I've shared it with, they thought it made a lot of sense also. And so what I'm saying and what I really want to share with you is just the fact that I understand. And sometimes it still happens to me. Prominent business owner, I feel highly successful in what I do and what I bring to the world. And yet still, I can sometimes even get caught by a label. And it takes me a moment. And it took me 7 days. Each day was a little different. I could tell. I was just really trying to make sense of that conversation and how it applied to me and how I felt. It'd been a long time since I'd felt like I was possibly a little disgusting for not being neurotypical and not being like everybody else. And I didn't like that at all. And it was great. It was awesome when it switched. And really what it was I recognized that if I was feeling this, after years of the work I have done, with all the support systems I have in place, with everything, I could only imagine what people without that must be feeling right now. And parents what they must be feeling. And I thought, oh my goodness, I need to be a lighthouse for people. And that immensely got me feeling strong and confident again. I'm like, I need to be a light, to continue to help people, to coach people, to bring people to the table for conversations, for learning, and for growing around these types of things. Because I don't want anybody feeling like that more than a few minutes. And anything past that is truly, it was a bunch of time you cannot have back. So this is just my reminder. In the end, those moments will come and they can go. You do not need to hold on to labels that other people project onto you, other people's interpretations. I strongly recommend you go exploring when that happens. That's really what I went into, was an exploration mode, to be like, what do I need to take from this moment and what I'm feeling right now? What has value in this? And what had value was, oh man, I got rerouted in my purpose, in my cause, in the fact I'm not an extreme activist, but I am definitely an advocate, and I love what I do. And it's really important that when labels get applied, quite often the focus is on the what's not possible. And I so highly recommend that you take the time to figure out what is possible. And don't even use that as a limit. That's just a starting point. I'm so grateful nobody limited me as a child with some of the things that I heard in that press conference, because that could have been detrimental to the rest of my life and my success. So I want to make sure that does not get projected forward. I would be immensely curious to hear about some of your reactions, but to also hear how you've dealt with times when people have applied labels to you, or you've maybe applied labels to yourself. And as you've explored that and learned more and figured that out, I would love to hear some of your process. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your time. Please follow. I would love for you to come back next week or many weeks from now and continue to learn more about your neurodifferent brain and all the ways it's incredible. I'm Joy Gina, International Neurodiversity Coach, and yes, I am a very different thinker. Thank you.